Te Kaunihera o Rotorua. Welcome to our council meeting for 24th of November. We'd also like to welcome those who are joining us by live stream. And just a reminder to please keep your mobile phones on silent or turned off. We'll take a morning break around about 10:30. I would like to ask Councillor Kaifong to open our meeting with the kariki.
Morena koutou, ki e unai tātou. Tuitoa mai I runga, tuitoa mai I raro, tuitoa mai I roto, tuitoa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai, ki e.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kaifong. I call for any apologies. There do appear to be none. Any declarations of interest today? There also appear to be none. Any urgent items not on the agenda? There also appear to be none. So we'll move straight to our confirmation of minutes. We're on page 6 of our council agenda. I ask for a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the council meeting held on 10th of November 2022 be confirmed as true and correct record. Moved by Councillor Lee, seconded by Councillor Waru. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. On to our first staff report of today. So page 11, I ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report, the appointment of council representatives to the Lakes Community Board and the Rural Community Board 2022 to 2025 be received. Moved by Councillor Kaifong, seconded by Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. And we'll hand over to DCE Una Hopkins to overview.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, councillors. So this paper that we have in front of you today is around the appointment of council representation to our Lakes Community Board and our Rural Community Board. So following the representation review in 2021, the determination from that was that Rotorua Lakes Council would continue to have a Rural and a Lakes Community Board. The membership of that on each board is for 4 members, which are elected by those either in the rural zoned area or the lake zoned area. In addition to members that are elected to the Lakes and the Rural Community Board, the council, the governing body, appoints a member or a councillor to each of those community boards. For this triennium, it has been put forward that Greg Brown will be the council representative to the Lakes Community Board and for Karen Barker to be the council representative to the Rural Community Board. So I'm happy to leave the overview there and take any questions if there are any.
Any questions?
Moved.
We'll take a mover and a seconder and then open for discussions. That's moved by Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Wang. Were there any discussions on this item? Good. I just want to signal as well my pleasure to appoint such competent and capable councillors to our community boards. Our community boards play a really important role in our council, representing those areas and ensuring that we get a strong voice across our district. So I am also pleased that for the first time we do have a rural councillor, and so it makes complete sense for her to be the strong voice that she already is in helping to support the rural community board and bring forward their views as well to the council table, as well as share council's activities with them. Also really pleased with how hard-working Councillor Barker is. It's a very big area to cover. Our rural area in the district covers 75% of the Rotorua Lakes Council district, so a very significant job she has ahead of her as well, already as a councillor, but we look forward to the strength that she will bring to the community board too. Also happy that we have Councillor Greg Brown, who has been a strong advocate and a passionate resident of the Lakes area as well. Environmental issues, water issues, lakes issues has just been something he's strongly advocated for too. So pleased to appoint a councillor who has shown such dedication in those areas onto, again, another very important area of our district with the significant amount of lakes that we have. So thank you very much to both Councillor Brown and to Councillor Karen for accepting the appointment. And we do have a mover, Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Fisher-Wang. And I would like to move that motion for us, that Greg Brown, Council appoint Greg Brown as the Council representative to the Lakes Community Board and Karen Barker as the Council representative to the Rural Community Board. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Unanimous. And we will have further appointments to come in the final December meeting as well. So we now move on to our next item, the non-tourism accommodation regulatory approach on page 14. I'd like to invite our Deputy Chief Executives, Jean-Paul Gaston, and also Anarupe Whairangi to speak to their presentation. To receive this report, may I please have a mover and a seconder that the presentation non-tourist accommodation regulatory approach be received. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Waru. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Over to you guys for your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell, and good morning, everyone. Anaru and I are just going to do this together, and it probably represents the crossover between our groups. So obviously my team deals with consenting, but the enforcement side of the organisation really sits with Anaru as well. So there is a crossover in this presentation. So we're just going to share the presentation duties here and just guide you through a bit of a presentation which just talks about the current next steps or our regulatory approach we're proposing to recommence, and also what that means in terms of the district plan, its requirements and those enforcement steps, but also give you an update of where that matches and fits together with our other requirements around the Building Act, which is also critical. Another piece there just around land information memorandums, so just some changes for information being provided in that space, and I'll touch on that later, and then we'll just wrap up again by summarising the actions that are proposed in the next few months.
Morena tātou. So the three parts working together, the district plan and the Building Act working in tandem, and see with the plan change, there's potential for a new proposal that JP will talk to later in regards to how the plan change fits into the three parts working together.
So I think as we go through this presentation, you'll just see that sort of one of the outcomes we're expecting achieve from those three pieces working now with the next steps is really to say as we see motels exiting emergency housing, ensuring that they're not able to restart. So there's been a bunch of unconsented activities undertaken, so this is the chance to, as their exit, to draw a line under that and just say you can only re-establish yourselves with a clear consent pathway. In the absence of that also, it gives us the opportunity through the enforcement and next steps in those Building Act and RMA processes to take further legal action if required. So that's the sort of the outcome of the three steps we're talking about today. So I just thought it was, there's a long history of the growth of emergency housing going right back to 2018, but I thought I'd just focus on 2022 I should say, and some of the things that have been undertaken at this time. So if you go back to May of this year, we identified 9 premises where we had particular concerns and we thought they were the highest risks. So we went off to the Environment Court to seek an enforcement order which would require them to either cease their operations or to begin a consenting process. So those papers were lodged with the courts, and the courts at that point, after receiving responses from all of those 9 motels, asked Council to withdraw its enforcement order because those motels had agreed to undertake the actions that we had requested, which was to start a consenting process. So all of them had engaged consent planners and had begun a process. So that goes back to May. For completeness, we had also sent letters to all motels that we suspected had been involved in some level of emergency housing. So an additional 41 letters had been sent both under the Building Act, which weren't to the owners of a premise, and under the RMA, which was sent to a lessee or an operator requesting that they examine their options around getting consents. So we had a mixed response. Some immediately came in and advised us that they were keen to engage with consent planners and start preparing a resource consent process. So a number of them have started work, but others advised us, and that's why the letters were really important, that they were not involved in emergency housing, and they sought to confirm with us that they weren't. So again, that's not the actual numbers that had been involved in emergency housing, but the 41 plus the 9 were those we had suspected had been involved at that time. So not the complete number. As you're aware, as part of the task force, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, the MHUD up there, had been seeking to contract and then seek consent for a number of motels, and in the case it was 13, to provide a better accommodation for families and children, and with additional wraparound services. They initially lodged a consent late last year, but with requests for further information extended that consent process right through into this year. I think the last request for service and the completion of those consent applications was in about April of this year. And obviously we've now moved through the hearing process. I don't believe the hearings have actually been formally closed. The commissioners may still request additional information, but the indication that they had provided was that they'd be seeking to make decisions on those 13 applications and get them out before Christmas. So a really important time frame and date. The importance of those hearings has also and the questions that commissioners and the evidence that commissioners have asked for is actually quite important for any other resource consent applications. So these 13 have been really important to understand and get from the community a sense of the cumulative social impacts that are underway, but also the cumulative economic impacts as well. So all of that has been come out in detail in the preparation for those hearings. So it's a really important input into proceeding now back into a situation where we have to say, right, with that information in line and a decision expected by December, we hope, we're in a better place now to understand what needs to be included in consent applications for any others who are seeking to receive a resource consent. Or, alternatively, with the return of tourism, a really good opportunity for operators to make a decision about which pathway they want to go down. Do they want to seek a consent for an activity around emergency or transitional housing, or do they want to now move into or back into their consented or initial purpose, which is tourism? So a really important point of time for the community. So we've talked to council before that our district plan did not anticipate or define emergency housing. I've talked to you all before about how our plan became operative in about 2015. Emergency housing legislation didn't come in until 2016. And actually the impacts didn't start ramping up in our community with the numbers of people being placed in motels till about 2018. And of course it became much worse when we got into 2020 and COVID lockdowns. Equally, the Building Act is ambiguous about the definition. So we've very much taken a view that there was a change of use. So there's a definition under the Building Act which talks about sleeping accommodation and defines sleeping accommodation. And there's another definition that talks about sleeping residential. And they have different standards under the Building Act for the type of premise. So in the absence of any clarity and no definition around what emergency housing was, and obviously no relevant case law, we had requested from MB, Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, what is called a determination. So when there's that ambiguity, you can submit a case to them and they determine it. So we felt this was critically important from a building safety perspective, and all of you are aware of the number of fires which have occurred in motels being used for emergency housing over the last year. So I think the number is 7 or 8. So as a community, we're incredibly lucky there hasn't been any loss of lives. So this was a really important issue for us, and we felt it was important from a Building Act perspective we get that determination so we could make that judgment about the standards that these premises must adhere to if it's a residential use. We lodged that, I think it was the end of January, and we had initially expected that MB would come back with a determination by May, and that it would be fast-tracked because of that risk we had highlighted around the fires that have occurred in our community. To date, we are still waiting a final decision and a determination of whether our interpretation is correct or incorrect. So we're still waiting on that determination. In the absence of that, we still believe we've got the correct pathway, and that goes to the process we're about to elaborate on. And sorry, just one more slide from me too. One of the other issues that we've seen occurring over the last couple of years is that there are still leases and motels that are being bought and sold. And our concern for some of those that are operating in the emergency housing space is there is a false value being applied to that on what is an unconsented activity. So we're now making sure that on LIM reports, which is a land information memorandum, if you're aware of people when they purchase a property, should get a LIM report, and that tells you all the information that council knows about the property, if there's any risks or any options or concerns about the property. So a really important safety piece for purchasers of property. And so at this stage we're going to be including on all motel properties this clause here to signal that the use as emergency housing is not a consented activity unless it's specified in that LIM report or on that property file. So just trying to at least send the message to potential purchaser as they are seeking to purchase or acquire something that may be undertaking an unconsented activity.
Okay, so look, using operationally our RMA enforcement tools, ensuring that with the process between RMA and Building Act, we're now confirming those EH motels that are exiting, and part of that operation is to ensure that our teams are doing site inspections. And from that, it speaks to the next slide, which is about us making sure and clear that we're building towards the basis for our legal enforcement.
And probably just from my side, adding to the third box there, so with inspections recommencing and ensuring we've got on record that inspections have been completed and we've cited whether they're involved in EH or not, that gives the platform for the enforcement team to either start further steps or enforcement action under the RMA or the Building Act. So that's the options we're now taking, whilst we still wait for confirmation of that determination. So we still believe it's appropriate for us to proceed forward on that and understand that we are visiting sites and confirming what actions they're taking. The last part there is a plan change question, and we've had submissions back via Plan Change 9, and it's been raised by Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, and it's been an issue which has made the Commissioner's job of reviewing the consent applications before them around the 13 motels harder, is because we do not have a definition of emergency housing in our district plan. It's sort of held under community housing definition, which again is not broad enough to understand that. So I've currently got the planning team working with our lawyers to put together an options paper to say what actions could we or should we take to try and clarify that moving forward within our district plan. Now that may be, the intention is to bring a paper to you on the 15th of December, just to give you some options about what those next steps are. Now that may be a technical definition that we have to try and insert into the district plan, or it might be through to a more substantive plan change. So we'll give you those options, and you'll have that opportunity to debate which is the right pathway for time and for clarity for us moving forward. So whilst we're dealing with a lack of definition, certainly under the Building Act, and certainly within our own district plan currently, the consenting procedures are starting to give us that direction. But actually, more importantly, moving forward, is we probably need to make sure our rules and our definitions within our district plan are up to date and cover the future. So there's a process there we have to take a longer term view on as well. And I suppose just then summarising what we're talking about there. So as we are beginning inspections, we're getting a clear understanding from some motels that they are or have exited, and they would like that to be recognised. So again, there's almost a request that we undertake some of these inspections so that they are seen to have been signed off, that they're no longer involved in emergency housing and they've returned to tourism. So that's one plank. The other part is simply to get an understanding of those that are still operating and encourage them down the consenting route if they wish to continue. So a really important chance for us to look at those cumulative impacts and also direct them as to how they should be going through those consenting procedures. And again, as say, having taken some initial legal action against 9, this enables us to again show that we've legitimately worked through both RMA and the Building Act process so that we are in a position to take further enforcement if required. And finally, I'll just note again that at this stage, those consents for the 13 Ministry of Housing and Urban Development family-orientated contracted motels, the decisions for those will be, at this stage, the intention is to try and have them out before Christmas. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you both. Question from Councillor Brown.
Thanks, guys. Do we know how many new resource consent applications there are, if any, over and above the 13?
My understanding is that we have only received one that is currently with the Consents Department at this stage.
And one more question, if I may. Do we have any idea the total number of motels remaining as mixed use currently?
Thank you, Councillor Brown. We'll be able to pick that up in the discussion around the Accord, if that's okay.
I think it goes to, and so part of the Accord is to make sure there's up-to-date information. At this stage, the only information that's publicly available on mixed use is that which has been obtained by Rotorua NZ through official information requests, which is, by the time they receive it, is already out of date. So the current information that sits on the Rotorua NZ website is a point in time, and I suppose one of the opportunities through this process is for us to clarify those motels who have exited, and through this process also be able to use that information to help Rotorua NZ update that website, so it does recognise those that have returned to tourism and are therefore legitimately able to come off that list.
Thank you. We have Councillor Waru followed by Councillor Maxwell, Patterson and then Councillor Lee.
Tēnā koe te manukura through you. Tuatahi akira, ka te mihau kia Fisher, kia Councillor Wang, tana hoki ngā mai i Taiwan, me te matenga o tana kuia, so e mihi atu nuna kia koe e hoa. Pai te ki te atu i a koe. Hoi anō, kia huri au te kaupapa. Thank you, JP, and thank you, Anaru, for the kōrero. Just a couple of questions. One, where is MSD in this conversation? Just thought I'd ask.
MSD are the source of the information and the official information requests that Rotorua NZ has used to populate the information they have about what motels are being used. We've been working with MSD within the task force partnership for since 2021, but again I think they're more front and centre currently as a partner or in the relationship around the Accord, which is you'll discuss further, but certainly the information is through that pathway.
And I'll just get our Chief Executive to further explain the relationships.
I think it's important.
Thank you, Mayor. Just through the Chair, I think it's important to note that the material that you're seeing here presented pertains to the actions of council. So any actions pertaining to MSD, Ministry of Housing, Urban Development, Kāinga Ora, are all subject to the Accord, which is a separate piece of work. So this piece of work is totally about what actions are council looking to actually undertake, and how do those actions work with respect to our RMA requirements, to our Building Act requirements, and how does it actually collectively result in a change. I think all of your questions with respect to numbers, MSD, and all of those aspects are all able to be covered, I think, within the discussion later on about the Accord.
Okay, thank you. So that I'll hold my next question for that time. Kia ora.
Councillor Maxwell.
Tēnā koe te manakura. Tēnā kuru ana ruarawa ko JP. Just two quick questions. The first one I have, JP, you mentioned about the returning to tourism prior to Christmas. I'm very interested in the signage situation. Is there going to be a criteria so somebody driving along there knows what they might be booking into?
I think one of the key issues here, and as I say, the hearing process is not formally closed yet, but signage is actually quite a key issue that came up during the consents around the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. So I think one of the things that's been really important in this is it's actually flushed out some of these important issues. Now, then that for a clarity of what the establishment has been used for, and also economically where it fits within our landscape of accommodation sector if it's not in that business. So that's an issue. We'll get some direction very clearly, I believe, from the consents that we'll receive back by Christmas. Now that will then help us move that conversation into any subsequent consenting discussions with any additional motels that may seek to change or formalise that they're staying in the emergency housing business.
Thank you. And my second question is way back in 2016 when emergency housing came out. I believe there's a move at the moment to try and probably return people back to Kingseat, back to Carrington and Waikeria. Should we support this move, or I'm interested in your views on this. Should we support this move?
I'm not entirely sure what that is, sorry, Councillor Maxwell, but I think it falls just outside of the scope of the presentation. So we'll keep the questions focused to Council's regulatory approach. Did you have any further questions?
No. Oh, just that quick one. We thought we might have got an answer by May this year on the consenting. December, we're still awaiting. Just a quick question, why? Do you know why the delays?
The responses that we've had from MB relate to their investigation. So they spent some time seeking additional information from the motel that we sought to identify as our baseline for that determination. So there was an extended period of liaising with that motel about evidence and information, so that added some delays. We've also been advised by MB that they had some delays and pressures around staffing, so that has slowed them down as well. So those are the responses we've had from them. We're hoping that we will still receive that determination soon, because it is really important for us in understanding whether the policy and the approach that we're aligning beside the RMA enforcement is right, and we'd like that safety of that determination. But at this stage, we're working off our own legal interpretation of what we believe the activity status is, or the activity is, under the Building Act. So again, I've talked previously about saying some of the work that the Rotorua Lakes Council is doing in understanding the status of emergency housing under the RMA and equally the Building Act, we are the only ones that are doing that.
Kia ora koe.
Councillor Patterson, followed by Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report, guys. Just a question on the dashboard. A few months ago, I counted up how many full use and mixed use there were, and there were 54 at that time. I think I counted it twice to make sure. And then last night, I had a bit of a look, and unless I got it wrong, I counted 60. So this coincides with a phone call that I had from a concerned resident from out in Holden's Bay area, concerned that one of their local accommodation providers was about to become emergency housing. Can motels just decide, after we've already said that we're preferring that this not happen, can they just keep adding to the mix?
I think in the discussion later on, you'll hear about where information and the data fits in the Accord discussion, so you'll be able to drill into the numbers in more detail at that point. As far as the signal we've done under LIMS and on certainly for new providers that are entering into this, you know, we've had almost a process where it snuck up on this community through that 2018 to 2020 and then into a COVID situation. So we almost had an activity that came in slowly over time. That's not the approach going forward. So if there's new accommodation providers putting their hands up to be involved in emergency housing, they need a consent, and they need a consent before they start.
Supplementary, just to clarify, so that they actually have to contact us to ask for permission. Do they know that?
We believe we've sent a lot of letters out to, and there's a lot of information out there in the community. I would find it hard to believe someone didn't know there is a consenting issue around being involved in EH. If you've been advised of certain premises which are changing or considering changing, that you've been made aware of, please let us know, and we will send out our enforcement team to seek clarification.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. Morning, JP and Anu. It's good to hear that there are some motels that are withdrawing from emergency housing. Would it be appropriate to give them a shout out, actually publicly acknowledge them here?
I think that's an opportunity that exists not within this building. You know, we've got a regulatory and a consenting approach, and from Anaru's side, an enforcement perspective. I think at that point, once we've resolved that side of the equation, there is an opportunity, certainly working with Rotorua NZ as our regional tourism organisation, to make it really clear who's back in the tourism game, what they're offering, or as a number of them are closing and renovating and relaunching themselves. So that's certainly a question that should be directed across to Andrew Wilson at Rotorua NZ, but I do understand they are fielding calls from those motels seeking to re-enter the tourism space. And he's certainly throwing his support behind them.
Thank you.
Were there any further questions? Look, I'll take the motion and then we can move. I'll ask for a mover and a seconder, and then we can invite a round of discussion and then put the motion to the vote. Thank you very much for your presentation, guys. So, mover and a seconder that the Council note that the Council organisation is following a regulatory approach under both the Building Act and Resource Management Act District Plan to ensure safe building practices and appropriate land use. Moved by Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Kai Fong. I won't put that to the vote yet because we'll invite if there's any round of discussion or comments that any councillors wish to make on this. Yes, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning. Thank you to JP and Anu for their reports today. Your Worship, I'd just like to add, I feel that there's an element of real frustration out in the community about what I see as a lack of urgency in our regulatory approach, and I take on board some of the reasons presented today why that. I must be honest, the idea that we've been waiting on a definition from government, I understand the wheels of government turn slow, but this sounds like they're almost in full reverse. Almost a year seems to me to be unacceptable. And given that some of the high-level meetings that I've heard about that we've been having with various ministers and agencies,
I find it very personally upsetting that we haven't been able to progress a definition much quicker, approaching almost a year. So I ask that in future, I hope our officers act, if I can say, with more urgency moving forward. And thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor O'Brien. I know your frustration about the situation that emergency housing has caused Rotorua is shared by many in the community and many around this table as well. I do want to acknowledge, though, that staff have been working very hard to the regulatory approach. As you can see, they have provided a direction of how we can move forward and give the community confidence that through our district plan, through the Building Act and through the Resource Management Act, and now with new leaders around the table, the community will see a different approach. As mentioned, and I think that it is important that they signalled, you saw the 3 boxes earlier, a plan change is also a possibility. It has been hugely frustrating, and I have shared in the public and media as well, the awkwardness for councils, not only for ours but across New Zealand, when the government is choosing to use buildings in a way that they were not consented for. So essentially that's where the issue lies. Are there any further people? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to endorse what you just said. What I took from the briefing this morning was that the council are moving forward with enforcement, even though MB haven't got off their haven't done their job yet. So I was actually very pleased to see that the council are taking enforcement action despite that, and so I think the council staff should be commended for that.
Thank you very much, Robert.
Trusting their legal interpretation is entirely sensible.
Thank you, and I think I do recall in the presentation it was 9 motels that have been taken through the Environment Court through that enforcement action in this time as well, which is good to see that they are being the enforcement action undertaken, although we do appreciate that that has come at a cost to ratepayers as well, so disappointing that councils had to do that anyway. Were there any further comments or items for discussion? Yes, Councillor Waru.
Oh no, just to make a comment, tautoko i ngā kōrero a Robert, around we use the tools that are available to us. Very difficult, and although I share Councillor O'Brien's frustration around how long things take, I think we're not the only council dealing with this at the moment. I'm sure it's nationwide. So I can't wait till that definition is sorted, but I commend also the staff for actually doing something anyway in the meantime, and we need to get something done to show the public we're trying to do something. But yes, I hope that we can put up a very good case to get this definition sorted. That would help a hell of a lot from what I can gather. So kia ora.
Absolutely, thank you, Councillor Waru. Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, JP and Anaru, for that presentation. And I think what we're trying to do here is to give some confidence to the public that Council is actually taking our regulatory role very seriously. We're moving as quickly as we can. And as JP said, we were trying to shut the door for motels that had previously operated as emergency housing and wanting to move back into that space that they can't then go back. So that we're really trying to use all the tools we can to shut that door, to stop that happening, but also to stop them coming in the back door again. And so I think that where we have tools, and they are limited in terms of the Building Act and plan changes, and I think that the use of the LIMS is also just another disincentive for moteliers to think that they can sell their motels for exorbitant sums of money, thinking that they can continue to make money for an unconsented business. So I congratulate the team on what they're doing, and I hope that we can give some confidence to the community that we are moving as a new council and with a new direction to the staff to take as much action as quickly as they can in terms of our regulatory space. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam, Your Worship. I like where we're going. It makes perfect sense. I think at some point in time when we've got all of our tools in place, that we draw a line in the sand and we take enforcement action for those that won't play the game. just signal that. I think that's an appropriate thing to do when we're ready, and sooner rather than later, I would say.
Yes, absolutely. Were there any further comments before we wrap this up? Okay, there do appear to be none. We have the motion on the table. It's been moved by Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Kaifong. I'll read it one more time. That Council note that the Council organisation is following a regulatory approach under both Building Act and Resource Management Act District Plan to ensure safe building practices and appropriate land use. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. So we now have a resolution to go into public excluded. I'd like to advise that there are 3 items for consideration in public excluded session. Number 1, a contract 22013 Marlene Road Seal Extension. Number 2, industrial land development. And number 3, Rotorua Housing Accord. The reasons for going into confidential for discussing these items are to enable commercial or industrial negotiations, to enable commercial activities, commercial sensitivity, and also to prevent disclosing a trade secret. I did want to give a little bit more information just on the need to go into confidential to discuss the Rotorua Housing Accord, as I do appreciate that it is of great public interest. Because we are still negotiating with the government on this, I personally did not want to set any unrealistic expectations if what we discussed today is then later on changed. However, because transparency and accountability is important to myself and this new council, the information discussed will be made public as soon as possible. There is an announcement on whatever the final housing accord will be, if the council chooses to progress, on the 9th of December. If possible, we'll share that information before, but that will be the date that the minutes of this item will be made public as well. So at some stage, when appropriate, we'll do that, but I just wanted to emphasise, to give the community confidence that it is only because we still are in negotiations and there may be some sensitivity to those negotiations as well. So better to discuss this and sometimes leader to leader between the council and ministry and our Te Aroha iwi partners.